Hello friends, I am Rob, sometimes OmnusI and sometimes the Dungeon Tutor on YouTube, but I'm here today to take part in RPGaDay on this, the 7th day, the 7th of August, to again talk about something, answer a question that, uplifts the gaming community and maybe introduces people to new ideas, and this one is one I'm very excited about. I think the Sunday questions are going to be really good ones. Today, the question is, describe a cool part of a system that you love. Now, there's two ways to interpret that. Either the system is cool or the part is cool. In this case, I can do both, because in this manner, the system that I'm going to be talking about is one that I've never run before, honestly, but it's one that I look forward to running in the very near future. It's called Blades in the Dark. And this is kind of one of those indie darling games. It's made by Evil Hat Productions, the same people who are behind Fate, or at least it was published by them. The studio's 1-7 or Forged in the Dark. And the website is bladesinthedark.com if you're interested in it. This is an interesting little niche game where you play as criminals trying to set up an organization and thrive in a pseudo-Victorian fantasy city with... It's definitely dark themed. The city itself is protected by these generators that create a lightning wall that screen out supernatural horrors on the outside. Not much chance of breaking out of that, but while you're inside the city, you're kind of flourishing. Or at least the average person can muddle their way through their days and maybe their lives. But things are dark. Life doesn't have the same meaning as it does to most of us today. So, you can set up a criminal organization and not feel too terrible about it because your characters won't, in general. So, the game itself is pretty fascinating in that it's a slice of life. You don't have a whole world to explore. You have one fairly small by many game standards city, and you are focusing on one element of crime that you want to have influence over. Maybe it's making sure people disappear. Maybe it's handling drugs. Maybe it's handling something like prostitution. Maybe it's handling... It's generally not nice stuff is what I'm getting at. There is a force of law and order out there that is trying to stop you. So you're working against them, but you're also working against rival gangs, especially when you are hitting rival gangs or fulfilling scores, the things that you're interested in your particular area of expertise. And you're trying to gather together a crew of people who will make your gang stronger and eventually, hopefully, the most infamous gang in the city. Some cool ideas there. Definitely got some cool ideas about letting players drive the action, giving them the scenario and letting the players make the plans. And the victories ultimately are the responsibility of the players themselves. All the while, the world is working against them. It's the rival gangs, perhaps, or maybe it's the law. Maybe it's even themselves. So, that's the system that I'm going to that I've just talked briefly about. I'm not going to go into the details on the game. I think they've got some really interesting ideas that I look forward to, but we're going to talk about one part of that really excites me. And it's a pretty basic thing for this system, but I think this is like one of the... And this may not even be the first game that had this system, but this is where I first encountered it. And it is the clock system. If you look, you see these little pie charts, basically, is what they look like. And basically they're a shortcut and tension builder and plot device all into one. As far as a shortcut, for the Game Master, it's a way of keeping track of various things that are happening throughout the game. What are the chances that the law is going to be brought into a scene that the players don't want the law involved in? Well, you draw a circle, put lines through it depending on how complicated it is. For instance, if the law is pretty close, you don't need to make a very intricate clock. It could be, say, 3-part clock. And the moment the players move into the scene, maybe the first part of that clock ticks. It gets shaded in or whatever. Now the players are aware that time is running out and the threat of the law coming in is hanging over their heads. So, say they make some noise. Say something very noisy happens that might draw the attention of the law. You shade in another box. The players can see that. They're like, oh, tension is up even higher. If we make one more mistake, here comes the law. That's not good. So now the players really have to worry about that happening. And again, they're looking at the likelihood of this happening. So when that last box is filled and the law comes flooding in, what they were afraid of has finally come true, but they've enjoyed that tension all the way along. Now, if you don't want to show the players all of that, you're just using it for yourself to keep track of time and keep track of things, then having your own internal clocks makes a lot of sense, so you can keep those in the Game Master's control notes. But everything as far as keeping track of the general nature of the relationship between players and maybe another organization. How I found this to be incredibly useful is right now I'm running 5th edition Dragon Heist. And if you've ever played in the modern Dungeons and Dragons adventure stories, they have factions. And the factions all are going to have some sort of an influence or relationship with the players potentially. And there's a bunch of them. There's the Order of the Gauntlet, and there's the Thieves Guild, and there's the Lord's Alliance, and all these different people. And it's easy as a track for myself that I can actually, I have a 20-point clock, and when the players do something good for the faction, I fill in a notch for that, fill in a slice. The guild likes them more, or the faction likes them more, and is more willing to support them. If I have thresholds, like if they desperately need out of a bad situation, like they've been arrested, if they have 3 ticks on the Lord's Alliance I have marked out, the Lord's Alliance will step in and free them once. But doing that will cost them a tick on that dial. It'll actually scale back the clock, which is another advantage of it. It goes forward and you can wind it back. So that earlier situation where I was talking about where you're in a heist and you're afraid the law is going to come in and you filled in your second box, well, if your characters have influence, possibly even with the law, perhaps you've arranged for a distraction that your inside person, for instance, might lead them away from the actual place where you're having your exploit. So when you successfully draw on that influence, it takes a tick off the box. It can work out for the players. It can also work out for the Game Master in the way that I just described. The clock system is brilliant. I mean, you can use any means you want, but honestly, I find that the appeal of having this clock and watching it fill up as the players do good and using it to track, yeah, I can import this into any number of games. This really is system agnostic as far as a mechanic. You can use this for anything. I have yet to put one in front of my players, though. Mostly because they haven't had any kind of circumstance like that where, something they dread is really hanging over their heads. Although if they had taken any longer to pay off their bills for the tavern they're resuscitating, I might have actually done that from the time that they would have started to foreclose. But that wasn't really a part of the story, never intended to be, so that wasn't something that was going to happen. But I see the potential of this, and I'm grateful that I got this game and learned even that mechanic made this worth it. I look forward to going through a lot more of this. The systems that are built into this will be fun to play, and I really look forward to putting this in front of my players who are more active and bring the story out, more deliberate in their role play, and trying to see a situation from the character's perspective, which that really will come in handy for this game. But if I was going to pull out and hyper-examine one element, the clock system, which is fairly basic in Blades in the Dark, can be used in a variety of games so easily. Again, put it in front of the players, you're going to build tension. Or you might even build a desire for them to see those boxes tick, and in their own way. If you think about it, if the party has really been working towards something, you might give them some indication of how close they are by letting them see a clock and letting it tick down and they can see how their actions are moving things forward. And if for some reason they do something that moves away from their goal, you might actually take a tick off that box so they can see it and go, oh, shoot, we really need to work on that. That's a not so subtle means of manipulating the players, but I can also see it as a way of rewarding visually inspired players. So, I think it's fair. I really do. And the more sandboxy you run, the more that mechanic might really come in handy. But when it comes to a very specific encounter scenario like a heist or a score in the Blades in the Dark setting, those clocks could be a really, really strong tool to allow your players to work both in the game and also in a metagame style, doing things that the characters have within their reach that they would have done to help the game, even if the players didn't necessarily consider it beforehand. Drawing on their resources and things like that adds an extra development and an extra dimension to the game. Dimensionment. That didn't work out very well as a portmanteau. But I think any game could really benefit from using the clock system if you, as a game master, find yourself that that kind of organization works for you and does help to inspire your players. So, I think that that'll be a pretty good example of one of those parts. And always when I get a new role-playing game, that's what I hope for, to find some new element that inspires me in a different way or gives me some new tools or different ideas, and the clock system from Blades in the Dark certainly did that. So, that's my addition to the general knowledge for the welfare of the gaming society. If you yourself have not ever checked out Blades in the Dark, it's worthwhile. It is kind of a niche game. You have to, have players who relish the idea of playing as criminals. Although what that criminal activity might be can vary. So if you just want to play like Fast and the Furious, where you're into underground gambling or pit fighting or something like that, that's a lot different than being hardcore assassins or handling the drug trade of the city. So different flavors, different feels to those games, but they could be run using Blades in the Dark. So that's what I had for today, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I am, of course, Rob, or OmnusI, or the Dungeon Tutor, and thank you for joining me this far. Again, if this inspires you to want to contribute your own ideas of parts and systems that you admire or you really love or you find are genuinely the staple of a game that you love and you want to talk about it, feel free to do so in the comments below on my Dungeon Tutor Facebook group, or maybe even make your own video. But if you do that, link it back here so we can see it. I'd love to see all kinds of parts of different games, maybe some that I've never seen before or even heard of before. Would be fantastic. It would make me deliriously happy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a video. If you're going to put a post on, say, social media, just hashtag it RPGaDay 2022, and that would be great, so other people can find it. But it's kind of a cool thing to be able to take something that you really love and show it in front of other people who are sympathetic and are eager to find out more. So, thank you very much for joining me. Until that next time, I wish the very best for you. May your dice rolls all be fair. And until that next time, farewell.